Thank you for that excellent talk. Our next speaker is Professor Robert Reilly. Dr. Reilly has worked as a teacher of computer science for the last 25 years at various institutions across the United States. Over the course of his career, he has received numerous awards and honors and has served in several professional leadership roles. The title of his talk is certainly provocative and timely in that it seems to connect the delivery of knowledge with the delivery of fast food in the 21st century. Please welcome Professor Robert Reilly to the podium.
So, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I have a test because this is about education, so we're having a pop quiz right now. What do you call someone who speaks 3 or more languages? Yeah, okay, good. Trilingual, multilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. Okay. What do you call someone who speaks 1 language? American? That was wonderful. My good friend, the previous speaker, I agree with everything he said. My offering today is to talk about the first few items he was speaking of. This might not work so much anymore. This might not work so much anymore. Nope. Just which button to press. So, I'm here. My speech is to talk about the most important learning device is probably the brain. Ultimately, whatever you have as a learning device, ultimately it's going to be the student's brain that you're dealing with, and how to best do that. This example, nice picture, but it might not work so much. Okay, my doctoral degree is not in engineering. I was many years at the MIT Media Lab. I have been a teacher for over 30 years. My beginnings was as a K-6 computer education teacher. I have been the president of the IEEE Education Society, and in the recent election for the IEEE Board of Directors, I apparently have annoyed enough people and frustrated them that I was elected to a long 3-year term on the Board of Directors, at which I hope to do many great things. My wife, I'm retired. My wife believes that my full-time job is with IEEE. My talk is about delivering knowledge, and as we go through this talk, I hope to talk about different terms, but I started with knowledge. We understand that term. It's a broad, general term. We have a good idea. Fast food, I'm not so sure I wanted to just make that digital outsourcing, but I hope to connect it and not confuse the issue. This is a moment where you read and I don't talk. This was something that I remembered from many years ago because it was a nice general opening to the idea of knowledge and why we want to do that. Okay. In my presentation today, I'm going to have several concepts. I'm going to present one, and then another one, and another one, and please don't in the beginning try to connect them, because I hope to do that as we get further into this conversation. I think only trying to connect them or think too deeply as I present them might be not so good right away. I hope to connect them as we move along. This is just a starting point. You may not agree with everything I say, but at least I hope to have you start to think about what we're doing. where we're going, how we deliver education. How we deliver education. And I would also like to take a moment to acknowledge the distinguished leadership of the Minister of Education, Dr. Reilly, for his visionary approach to what has to be done, and his leadership in allowing this to happen and other people to bring that vision forward. I always wanted to be famous. I got to MIT. My first time at MIT, I thought that there was an outside chance that I could be the smartest one there. Well, I did. I dream. Well, that wasn't a dream, but I hoped that I wasn't at the bottom of the situation, and if I was, I had to think of a way to hide that for as long as possible. So here is my one chance to have something named after me, and from thank you for okay, this rule. We can't just throw out education, knowledge, information, and have people catch it and understand it, and not just understand it, be able to apply it in other areas. We have to devise a better rule. Here's another thought. Might not be connected to the first one, but I hope it will be. Those who cannot unlearn, relearn. We have to do that because, as my good friend, the previous speaker, said, we didn't know what jobs exist. 5 years ago when we were teaching people, we didn't know what we were teaching them for. The jobs didn't exist yet. Here's another one. I'm going to stop talking. Your job is to read right now. Think about this. Over the past 10 years, think of all the changes there have been in all of these areas: transportation, medicine, communication. Just think of the changes there have been in the things that, and I hope mine is not on noise. I've set it to vibrate. Think of all the changes there have been in this device the past 5 years. Now, think of the changes there have been in not just education, but educational pedagogy, how we do it. If we still have professors, teachers that stand on the stage in front of their students and expect students to catch learning and be able to understand it. Okay, so really what we're dealing with is the brain, and there are many parts of the brain. Sometimes in college there's a special section in there for men learning how to get a date with a woman, and that might not work so well yet. There are different parts of the brain we're working with. And in another, this is a separate part of my talk, there are different parts of the brain we're dealing with. And that's what we do. Whatever device we have, we are throwing the information at that part of the brain. We want to throw it at different parts of the brain. But if you're sitting in the audience just listening, that part of your brain that should best receive this might not be on. And let me, an example would be the test in the beginning, bilingual, Americans speak one language, hopefully got one part of your brain that you might not have had turned on. Hopefully that turned it on for a bit. Because in today's world, you can receive information through multiple channels at the same time. You can receive through multiple channels at the same time. And I think one of the purposes of education we need to fully develop is being able to use many parts of our brain. Many parts of our brain. We don't know how high is up. Okay. There are studies out that say multitasking is cognitive overload. Here's an important point. It's overload. However, they're doing this and testing people and coming to this conclusion on brain pathways that haven't been developed at a very early age. Children are taught using one pathway at a time. They're not taught to do multitasking or how to use multiple channels at the same time. Boy, today's kids, they can be on the thumb, on the machine, on the computer. They can be on their tablet and listening to someone. They can be doing that all at the same time, and don't they have that all organized? They know all of those things that are going on. In my generation, when we did that, we might not be able to do that. We've not had training at an early age, developing all the parts of our brain to work at the same time. We have one at a time. Okay. And I believe we need to develop this in a general way, using whatever skills are in school, whatever skills are necessary, not primarily subject-specific, but we need to focus on developing many parts of our brain. We need to develop that skill. We need to develop, build, and mature those pathways. Okay, next thought. Generally, I'm going to try to put things that I've said now and things that are coming and talk about a process. So just so that we all are on the same process, process has how many ever steps in it. Generally in education, the teacher in traditional education, there would be a process. Talk, listen, understand, some more talk. The process wasn't the best. But anyway. So I hate to use call centers, but the modern education, there are so many resources on the web that we can send students to those resources and not have to spend time in class having the student learn about them. We can give homework, and that could be outsourcing it, not a human call center, but to some website. We're going to do digital outsourcing somehow. But we need to think much wider than just a call center. We need to understand when we outsource this, when we send students to these websites, there are not one, but what we're talking about are two different kinds of websites that we're going to go to. Some are rule-based knowledge domains. Some are model-based knowledge domains. In my teaching days, which wasn't that long ago, I went into first grade and I taught spelling. And the sources, the outsources, the websites that children could go to learn spelling were really good. They were engaging and active and fun. Children liked to go there. Learning spelling is a rule-based knowledge domain. Once you learn how to spell the word, you have all the knowledge there is. It won't change by scientific inquiry or research. That's it. Driving, history, well, history is up to interpretation, but history of a country doesn't change so much. Those are rule-based knowledge domains. Sending a child or a student off to one of those sites, measuring its effectiveness or just assuming its effectiveness is fairly easy compared to a model-based knowledge domain. So successful studies that have showed great success are greatly successful because the student is going to a rule-based knowledge domain. They're learning the rules. There's no underlying theory. There's no deep learning in there. When we are looking at how people outsource, how websites are used to enhance learning, we have to look at the best pedagogical models, not just the best knowledge, not just the best models in education. And I use fast food because I was going to a McDonald's in the USA and I was thinking about this model, and there was a drive-up. And I've seen some of them here. There was a drive-up. McDonald's has 2 order rows. And I was sitting there and saying, boy, this is going to cause a choke point because they haven't really investigated the model. And what we're doing right now is I hope to have us explore a generic model for outsourcing. So there's 2 cars there, and I said, oh boy, this is going to be a traffic jam up at where you pay and where you receive food. But I sat there and watched, and if there was one drive-up window, it would take 2 minutes between cars. But the person to collect your money is only a minute. The person to give you the food by the time you get there, it's another minute. That's less time than having 2 rows. There would be no choke point. Plus, I went over and asked a few questions, and the person taking your order wasn't in the building. They were somewhere else with 3 or 4 other stores. And I said, oh, education could do that by looking at the models we use to deliver education and saying, what can we outsource? How can we better do it, even if we have a really good model? Think about McDonald's. Okay. My big concern is, of course, how do we deliver the fruits of knowledge to a student? How do we do that? Before, basic models were rule-based. Spelling, geography, history, well, math too. Students are not really equipped to meaningfully understand STEM, in my opinion, because we don't develop at an early age the ability to use multiple channels of the brain at the same time. We don't allow the student to understand how to switch areas of their brain. And perhaps the student can't do that. I think the lesson has to do that. The lesson has to do that. Just as I hope in the beginning of my conversation, in my talk today, where I asked the test, your brain switched where it was in listening mode to somewhere else in the brain, in one of those other sections. Yep. The brain areas need to be much more exercised, and that happens in the lower grades. We're trying to build, my metaphor is we're trying to build automobiles without really building the automobile factory. The obstacles, again, K3 brain power and pathways and areas need to be much more developed. We're really not trying to build geniuses, we're trying to build everybody. Geniuses will happen. They will be the honor society people. They will seek their own way. Oftentimes, we just get out of their way and let them carry on. We just get out of their way. Okay, next thought. At MIT, we got together and decided to build an affect-sensitive cognitive machine, and that would be a machine that would be able to recognize your face, know what stage of learning you're in, be able to recognize if you were becoming frustrated, bored, if you were doing cognitive assessment, which immediately we came to the conclusion that all 3 of those look alike. 2 things we wanted to do something about, we wanted to intervene. One of them, cognitive assessment, we wanted to leave the student alone. So we looked for educational pedagogy that would support those models, and we couldn't find any. Okay, so all of those things I talked about in a very quick way, I'm going to try to get back to business and put those into a model for delivering knowledge and talk about the language of education. The words we use in education became a problem for us, the MIT Media Lab, my research group, when we were developing the affect-sensitive cognitive machine. We had to have a model and understand what concepts we were talking about. In other words, on a broad scale, whether we were talking about a rule-based knowledge concept or a model-based knowledge concept. Those require much different approaches. Okay. So here are some words we commonly use in education. I didn't put SMART up there because if you ask the question, I couldn't figure out where it goes. But we have a... So here are some concepts. Here are some concepts. And it seemed we needed to understand what each of these was, what we're talking about. So let me offer these. My hope is that as you think through these, you may change them, you may agree, you may disagree, but at least we will have concepts to go along with the words which go into our model. Yeah. We're going to disambiguate these terms, I hope, for you. And, again, it depends on what process you are thinking about, what you outsource, what you teach in front of children, what you teach in front of the students, what can be a website, and what you do with the website. How do you measure whether the student understands it accurately or not? Intelligence. I think intelligence is the capability to think and solve problems. It may be your capability to be smart. Again, I didn't play with the word smart because I didn't think about it too much. I couldn't find an answer, so I just put it aside for a moment. Intelligence, a capability. Okay. Knowledge, collection of beliefs, methods, ideas. That's knowledge. They're culturally neutral. It doesn't matter if you know how to do something. The fact that you know how to do it is either good or bad. People know how to build explosives. Sometimes those are really good things to know and a good knowledge to have if you are building bridges you need to move mountains. And in other areas of the world, as we see, being able to do that and apply that knowledge is very bad in most cultures. Wisdom. I don't know if we can put into our model the idea of wisdom, because wisdom is how students take what you give them in education, the big word again, big concept, knowledge, intelligence, and how they apply it. How they apply it in a value system. Information. Okay, answers to a question, that's easy. Spelling, the driving test, history. Data. Data is just a bunch of little bits of information, a bunch of little bits that form information. It's a question that nobody's asked yet. Education, again, another big process. Provide tool for thoughts. Education. Education is a concept like freedom, liberty. We know what it is, but defining it and using it as a model in a model might not work too well. Teaching and learning. I think these are mutually exclusive terms, and interestingly enough, my good friend, the previous speaker, I didn't talk about teaching, he talked about learning, because Socrates long ago said, I can't teach anybody anything, I can only help them learn. And how we do that seems to be a problem of this age. Pedagogy is just the method, seminar, lecture, project, and the many things that were excellent in your talk that are happening in Abu Dhabi. I was incidentally very impressed and was glad to come here to hear what you had to say. Okay, pedagogy. Oh, here I couldn't resist putting this in again, huh? Here we are. Okay, rule-based. We're going to start to get into creating a model, see what we can do. Rule-based information. Learning the rule, once you learn the rule, you have all the knowledge there is. Hopefully applying it might not be considered wisdom, but who knows. Model-based knowledge domain are the sciences and engineering, where you have a theory, a model underneath where you have to understand it and apply it. If you apply it badly, the bridge will fall down that you've just built. Okay. Now, this, I think, was the typical, traditional, old-time model that we all, maybe I learned under. We are still here today, it seems, in far too many cases. We're in making game show contestants. In the United States, we have shows where, on television, where people are pitted against each other to answer questions more quickly than their opponent. The winner gets money and trips. But all they have to do is come up with the answer. If someone says E equals mc squared, the answer might be Albert Einstein, theory of relativity, but they don't need to understand why it's E equals mc squared is so important. And in model-based knowledge domains, that is critically important that we understand how come. A model-based knowledge domain is the sciences, engineering, and here's the model for that. The first part of this curve, from the upper right down to information, is a rule-based model. And that's good. You have to start there. However, from information up the other side is what we need to do in model-based knowledge domains. And the problem nowadays in the United States certainly is we have standardized testing. Standardized testing is antithetical to a rule-based knowledge domain. It is very difficult to measure someone's, I say knowledge, how much information, how much knowledge someone has by a piece of paper, how much knowledge they have, especially in science and engineering. And at the top, good old Socrates, he had a really good idea. I wish they had videos of him back then and we could see them, of how he worked. But Socrates did story making, and at the top of the model, it starts to go back around in a circle and comes out in this helix shape where it starts back here, keeps going around in a circle and coming out. The what if. Let me give you an example. If you were a professor in an engineering class and you were talking about Nikola Tesla's theory, Nikola Tesla wanted to broadcast high voltage electricity. And that's, if you go to his museum in Belgrade, they're full of that, and it's a good idea. He couldn't get that to happen. The U.S. could maybe do that and make a weapon out of it, but that's not the idea. If your class was talking, you would say to your class, what if Nikola Tesla's theory worked? What if you were the person in class who was going to win the Nobel Prize? You are the person in class who can solve Tesla's equations and broadcast it. What would happen to the world? What would happen to the world? Well, anybody who dug petroleum out of the ground would instantly be in a problem situation, because now you can broadcast electricity to cars the same way you can broadcast radio. Electric engines would be the norm of the day. What would happen to the world sociologically? What businesses would go away? What businesses would come into effect? Even if you couldn't, well, we can't do it yet. But to teach students to think about what if, to teach students to think like a scientist, to teach students to think like a scientist. Okay, so those are my concepts. So how do you propel the learning journey? Thank you. It was an honor to see you. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So how do you propel the learning journey? And let me say that I was sitting with a professor at MIT, and we were having supper at her house, and we were talking, and she was talking about the teachable moment, where the professor's talking and someone says, oh, I know about that, and then they're motivated. And my comment was, why can't we cause that to happen? Why can't we cause the teachable moment? And then we applied for a National Science Foundation grant and got one for 3 years, then an additional 5 to do that. And oh my, manipulating the emotional state of a student. Perhaps I'm talking less like an athletic coach where you have to psychologically get someone much more invigorated. But this is getting their brain invigorated. Let me give you an example, the one I said in the beginning. These 3 emotional states of a student look the same, but in the first 2, you must intervene and do something because they've stopped learning and they're disinterested. The third one, you need to leave them alone because they're thinking about what just happened. How do you deal? What do you do about those different states? Well, as we thought some more about that, this fellow Paul Ekman decided to do what he called facial action coding system, where he took points on the face and measured them, identified them, and then coded them so that this is angry. And I was talking with him and I said, well, you didn't have to do that. When I come home, my dog knows if I'm angry or not. What's the point here? Well, we got into another conversation where these were the emotional states, and please don't be overcome by these. My dog recognizes these, most of them, when I come home. On this side are negative emotions, which aren't necessarily bad. Over on that side are positive emotional states, which aren't necessarily good. We are pretty much focused here in education. We are pretty much focused here, and specifically in science and engineering, we're focused on curiosity, because when I first got to MIT, one of the things I did was meet as many Nobel laureates as I could, because I wanted to know what they were like so I could try to be like that. And curiosity was something they had. Curiosity was something they had a great deal of. And they could manage their own state of curiosity. So if they were becoming bored, they could pick an emotion over on this side, being hopeful, being pleased, and get themselves back on this side of the emotional state and head up to curiosity. And I don't want to oversimplify this, but it is. Sometimes when they were curious and over here on the right and interested, sometimes they get too interested and the professor needed to move it over to the left, make them frustrated, give them a solution that maybe they would work at and not be able to solve. Professor would come in and give a hint, make them hopeful, get them back over on this side toward curiosity. Curiosity and engagement is where we are trying to head. Okay, here are some inspired leaders. Here's some, no really, here are some inspired leaders. My next point is, so you're a teacher, how do you run the model? You're a teacher, how do you run the model? You have to also, no, really, from the Smart Learning Initiative, really. So you can identify these people. They all had different characteristics. Some are quiet and unassuming. Some are, I imagine, Julius Caesar, not so quiet, not so unassuming. Leonard Mandela, Deng Xiaoping, Charles de Gaulle, Mother Teresa. Many of those people couldn't switch roles. And I think it's important for you as an educator or people you have as educators to understand what your personality is like, because that will affect how you deliver knowledge. How good are you at standing up in front of class and talking, because ultimately that has to be done a little bit, hopefully less than before. Okay, in conclusion, delivering knowledge, certainly it's about the technology, but from my end of this, the most important technological device is the brain. Think about the brain and how you deliver knowledge to it. Okay, well, I've put it up 3 times, huh? That's my rule. That's my rule. And from Mr. Gayeth's presentation, it's his rule too. Okay. We need to have a change in pedagogy and the methods we use to deliver knowledge, deliver wisdom, whatever you call it, deliver that to students. More engagement's one way, more curiosity is another. And we need to recognize emotional states of learning and manage those. And not in a bad way, but in a way to engage students, to enable them to do the best work. We need to manage the brain functions and understand which part of the brain we need to get working on whatever the project is. And to do that, see if the camera follows me, guess not. To do that, we need to understand what part of the brain we're using and what that brain part does. We need to engage it in very young children, 1st grade, 2nd grade, 5 and 6 years old. Doesn't have to be academic exercises, could be fun exercises. Fun is part of the word function. We need to think of exercises that will engage children's brain. Hopefully they will be more educational than just silly fun, but if you're dealing with engaging many parts of the brain, could be silly exercises because you're trying to engage multiple parts of the brain. Okay. Digital outsourcing was the call center business, but you must know the difference between model-based and rule-based knowledge domains when you start to outsource using websites to increase knowledge. Model-based. Going, whoop. Our general goal is to deliver a functional adult, and as my predecessor colleague had said, we might not know what that is in 5 years. 5 years ago, we didn't know for today. So what do? How do we construct? Deliver pathways in primary school. And the language of education, I think it's important to know the differences in all those words and how they apply in the model, rule-based, knowledge-based, manage the affective states of a learner. And I'm sorry to put so many up there at once, but the idea is there are all those. We want to sometimes use the negative emotional states, sometimes use the positive, but if nothing else, we're headed back toward curiosity. Cognitive dissonance might be a negative one that we might want to use many times to get people back toward curiosity. And what are your strengths? How are you as a teacher? If you're quiet and reserved, there's a different approach than if you're someone who may be like me. Maybe. Okay. That's my email address. Thank you very much. It's been an honor to be here and hear what I will be hearing what you have to say. Thank you.